Thanks everyone for coming. It's the first time we've done one of these as a webinar in a little while, so forgive us if we're a tad rusty and internet connections are a bit dicey here and there in the house. So why are we here is my job to remind everyone why we're here. What is Agile Games Workshop all about? So Agile Stationery make paper things, paper resources for professionals. So that might be helping you deliver a piece of branded merch, helping you deliver a piece of content that you need to prompt or remind people to behave in a certain way, or signal that something new has started in your organization, bed in a transformation, many other use cases. So we make and retail games. We also retail games that other people make from time to time, such as Jeff Watts, Paul Goddard, a few others. And we would do quite a lot of custom work these days. We've handled rucksacks. We're going to do luggage, done stencils. So paper and paper adjacent things for people that want to get a certain job done around Agile or an adjacent discipline. So for example, we do quite a lot of cybersecurity stuff with Stack and threat modeling in general. The reason we have a meetup is that we like to share our games, create a space for the game to be demonstrated, and allow people to get feedback on their game. So StrongSuits is quite an established game now. It's been going around for a few years. We're giving a little bit of a push, a bit of a help, and have invited Ryan to list the game in our catalogue to start with. Thank you for agreeing to that. And thank you also for sharing it with our audience. Devika, are you ready to take over?
Yes, fingers crossed for the internet, but I will keep this as quick as possible. Oh, I can see you guys now. Actually, the internet was so bad at my end just now. I couldn't actually see your faces, but I can see your faces now. Yes, Ryan, I'd like to introduce you today. So you are an enterprise and team coach, consultant, and change facilitator. You actually started off in software development and project and program management in e-commerce, but then you transitioned into coaching, facilitation, training, and have since designed and run a number of training and workshops in areas like Agile coaching, team facilitation, management 3.0, StrongSuits, scaled Agile framework, and lean change management. I was interested to learn a little bit more about you in terms of your education stuff, which was actually quite fascinating. So you actually grew up in South Africa. Is that right? If I've got that right. And you hold an electrical engineering degree. I always find these things quite fascinating. So what we all started off with from the University of Cape Town, and an MBA from Warwick Business School. And you wrote an interesting dissertation comparing Agile methods to traditional methods of management, which I think I would find an interesting read. And just tells us that you've been there from the start, comparing, contrasting, and now helping companies and organizations transition. You've taught all over the world, including English as a foreign language in Spain, where you lived once. I read your interview. How did you find that?
Wow, you've definitely done your research. Some of these things I haven't mentioned for years. How did I find that? I loved it. Yeah. I think it actually ignited my passion for teaching. So then I went into training. Yeah, it was a great experience.
Fantastic. Well, you're here with us today. That's always yes. I think when you go to places like you did in Spain, I've never tried that. I've never gone to a place, lived there, and taught something. But I think you're just exposed to a whole new kind of world. So yes, your experience sounds fascinating. You're here today to talk about strengths. We actually thought it would be great to start the year with something positive, and this seemed to just fit in with how we wanted to kick off our year at Agile Stationery. So you're here to talk about strengths and how individuals and teams can talk about their strengths in a way that helps them achieve sort of their best as a team, as an individual. So I will hand over to you now, Ryan, so you can talk us through playing to your strengths today.
Great, thanks, Devika and Simon, and welcome everybody. I don't know if I'm supposed to see people or if everyone has got their cameras turned off.
The attendees will be invisible. If the attendees want to interact a bit, we have a chat section and a QA section where people can pose a question and receive an answer, and I think upvote, but we haven't done that in a while. So don't quote me on
Perfect. And is the chat function working? Can we ask a question on the chat or not?
It is, yes.
Okay, perfect.
I can see chat and I can see Q&A. I think as the host, I am going to be moderating and sharing that part.
Okay, excellent. So should I be able to see that? Yeah, I can see the chat. Perfect. Okay, welcome everyone. As mentioned, this is going to be more a talk than a play, even though we're talking about playing to your strengths. I will stick around till the end because I'll talk about ways that you can experience this, particularly if you're in the UK and particularly if you're near to London, how you might interact with their games actually physically. And of course, you can just buy the cards yourselves and play around, and there's a lot of free materials that can get you started. But if you also wanted to take it to the next level, we have various ways that you can interact at the moment, particularly in the London area, but soon to expand further afield. So what is StrongSuits? So it's a game. So people are playing cards, as you can see, and hopefully having some fun and talking about the things that really matter to them in their work, in their organizations, in personal development, team development, career development, performance appraisals. You can really, it's quite flexible. You can use it in many different contexts. So the first question is, what is a strength? One definition is to say a strength is something that you're not only good at, but that you enjoy, that comes naturally to you. Someone might say to you, you're a good listener, and you might say, what do you mean? I don't think about it. I don't try to be a good listener. I just like listening to people. And that's what, probably you're picking up on, is that I just do what I do, which is listen. So it's something that comes naturally to you. You generally don't think about it, and so doing, you usually enjoy it because it doesn't take much effort. And if something is taking a lot of effort, then that's fine. You can develop the competence in it. But if you were doing that all the time, and that was your kind of full-time job, you generally get quite tired. So not playing to your strengths generally causes fatigue, stress, burnout, etc., etc. So we'll go a little bit into that. So first question is, if you can use the chat, is what's one strength that you like to see in the people you work with? If you're able to use the chat, if not,
Brian, that's being debugged right now.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll come back to that then. It's fine. We'll come back. So you can think about it in the meantime. One strength that you like to see in the people you work with, and as soon as that chat comes up online, you can type it in. So you might have come across the meme that says something like, if you try to teach a fish to fly, it'll spend its whole life thinking that it's stupid. And really, if you think of a lot of performance appraisals, job descriptions, they're based a lot around standardization. Even schools standardize tests. So there's a kind of a description of what you should be good at, and then you get marked against it. You're good at this, you're not so good at this, you suck at that, you need to get better at that. Now, of course, to some degree, we need some basic skills. We need our 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. We need to have some basis in certain skills. But what we're going to talk about today is how can we get the best out of a team, a system, an organization by noticing and appreciating the diversity of strengths, the best strengths that everyone brings. So if you want to climb a tree, the monkey's going to be better at climbing a tree. We could probably teach the fish to climb a tree, and with a lot of effort, the fish is going to kind of, try and wrap its fins around the bark and get up the tree eventually. But then, like we said earlier, they're probably going to be stressed, burned out, fatigued. And so what we really want to do is to acknowledge that we all have different strengths, and how can we play to those strengths to the best of our ability and our energy, and therefore the best of the team and the organization's ability. A little bit of stats about strengths. You may have come across the Gallup organization stats around the number of the workforce that are engaged or disengaged or actively disengaged. This particular study that you see here is a lesser known one, which actually came out of 2009 when they took a random sample of over 1,000 employees and asked them, how they felt engaged, disengaged, or actively disengaged based on their managers' focus on their strengths versus their weaknesses versus ignoring them. And as you can see, in the case where the manager focused on their strengths, a very small percentage of people were actively disengaged. And the difference between disengaged and actively disengaged is that disengaged people are like the people who switched off. It's what we have come to call the silent quitters. You're not hostile necessarily, but you're just not motivated and engaged. You're kind of doing the minimum to get by. Whereas actively disengaged, you're actually negative, hostile, miserable, and contributing to the negativity in the environment. What's perhaps even more interesting is that in the case where my manager ignores me, there are more people actively disengaged and disengaged than in the case where the manager focuses on weaknesses, which suggests that people need to feel that they're noticed and that someone cares and someone is at least interested in them. But it's far better if they're interested in them from the perspective of their strengths than from the perspective of their weaknesses. So, yeah, how's the chat doing? Getting there yet? So if you want to type that into the chat,
I'm hearing from Jeff and Jenny. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jenny. That's not working.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and thanks, If.
Okay.
Right. So the question is, what's the one strength that?
It's fine. We'll move past that one. It's not
All right.
necessary. If people want to ask any questions, I think they can still use the Q&A, and we'll pick those up later on. Okay, perfect. All right. So what are the big ideas? So we've talked a little bit about people performing best when they play to their strengths, and Gallup have done a huge number of studies into that, which you can look into. Another idea is that how we perform is driven by the stories we tell ourselves. And what we mean here is the kind of inner narratives, what goes on inside our heads, our beliefs, our mindsets, our attitudes, whether we believe that we can do something or we believe that we can't do something. And there's also a famous saying by Henry Ford that whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. In both situations, it will actually play out in the way that you believe. So there's a suggestion that how we think really determines a lot of how we perform. And the kind of beliefs that we have, I mustn't be too loud, I mustn't be too soft. The kind of mental programming that we've picked up, usually from a very young age, and through our experiences in life and in our work environments, that kind of determine the stories that we tell ourselves, which impact our performance. So we'll go a little bit into that as well. And then diversity makes teams stronger. And a lot of studies done with McKinsey and Co. around the value of diversity. And of course, there are many different types of diversity, gender diversity, ethnic diversity. And here we talk particularly about cognitive diversity. So we'll go into that a little further, but all forms of diversity have been shown to increase performance. So if you increase diversity on one dimension, you're more likely to increase performance, regardless of what that dimension of diversity actually is. And then lastly, people interact and communicate in different ways. So this is particularly based on the work of Linda Behrman around interaction styles, as well as the work of William Moulton Marsden, which eventually led to the creation of the DISC system. That how we communicate really depends a lot on our perspective. or vice versa. Our perspective determines how we communicate. So we'll be looking at that, at what our natural communication styles are, and how that can help or hinder, in some cases, communication. So let's dive a little bit into the cards themselves and what we can actually do with them. So as we mentioned, it's a standard pack of cards, a 52 deck pack of cards. And so the nice thing about it is that you can go and use them just like you would a standard 52 deck of cards and play any game that you like. And in fact, we've seen that in some organizations, that a pack of cards has been lying around and people have started to play, you know, gin rummy or whatever game that they enjoy. And then they start to notice, oh, that's really interesting. What's actually going on here? That's a strength. Do you have the strength? Do I have the strength? And they get into all kinds of interesting conversations that they might not have expected them, and go in all sorts of directions they wouldn't have expected to go into. So it's one of the advantages of having the pack of cards. It has multiple uses. So each card has a strength. So something like, let's say, ambition. And we probably all agree that some amount of ambition is a helpful strength to have in the workplace. It says, I set challenging goals for myself and others. And some amount of challenging goals that we set for ourselves and others is useful in most, if not all, work circumstances. But what happens when that strength becomes overplayed? So we have too much ambition. We might say that a person who is overly ambitious might find it difficult to relax. It might be difficult to be around, perhaps. And so usually what we might call a weakness is actually an overplayed strength. So if you think of someone who has a lot of confidence, and what happens when that confidence gets overplayed, we might say that that person is arrogant. So usually what happens is that when we're under stress or when things aren't going our way, we default to our natural strength, but we overplay it. We do what we normally do, but we just do more of it. And we expect that that will become the result. We just default to it without even realizing it. So one of the big ideas is that what we often call a weakness is actually an overplayed strength. So that's the one kind of dimension that we can look at. Another dimension we can look at is pairs of opposite strengths. So we could say that someone who is ambitious, if we take the opposite of ambition, but still from a strength perspective, we could say that the person is easygoing, and we have some element of easygoingness is a strength. And of course, it's contextual. Depending on the context, it might be more appropriate to be ambitious, and in other contexts, it might be more appropriate to be easygoing. But some element of both of those strengths are useful to have in the workplace. So the easygoing strength says, I am relaxed and easy to get along with. It's more people focused. It's more on the dimension of people. And then a big picture and detail. It's not typical that you would say that someone who is focused on the big picture would also be very focused on the finer details of things. Of course, we can have opposite strengths in one human being, but typically when you think of someone, you would tend to not describe the same person as being ambitious and easygoing in the same sentence. You wouldn't say this person is a naturally ambitious and easygoing person and expect that to be a useful description of that person's characteristics or behavior. Likewise with big picture and detail. So we could say that we could benefit from both of those strengths in different contexts. With my previous business partner, she was more big picture and I was more detail oriented. So she would come up with more of the big ideas, and then I would say, okay, hold on, let's go into that a little bit. And let's kind of see how we would actually materialize that idea. And so initially it caused some conflict where she was coming up with a lot of ideas. And as soon as I was starting to go into some detail, she would be onto the next big idea. And I would be like, well, hold on. And she saw that initially as me trying to close her down or shut down her creativity. And I was getting frustrated because I wasn't getting the detail that I needed. And so when we played this and we realized, oh, that's because she has the strength of big picture, I have the strength more of detail. and we both had some of each other's strengths, but we were more focused on one strength than the other, then we could realize, well, okay, let's give her the chance to really come up with those ideas, and I'd be sitting there quietly writing them down. And then eventually, when she'd exhausted herself, I would say, okay, well, let's go into these. And that usually meant me actually going away and having to think about it and go more into the detail of it, and then coming back at a later stage. So that's how we benefited from looking at our opposite strengths in that particular context. And so we could say that the opposite of a strength is not a weakness, it is actually another strength. So if I had to ask you what was the opposite of optimism, unfortunately, we don't have interactivity there, but I can imagine that some of you would be saying the opposite of optimism is pessimism. Yeah, that's the most common response that I usually get when I ask this question. But we could say that the opposite of optimism is actually caution. If I was living next to a fireworks factory, a factory that manufactured fireworks, I would want the manager of that factory to have the strength of caution rather than the strength of optimism, right? What would happen if we just left these boxes of fireworks next to the kitchen? Yeah, I'm sure nothing will happen, right? So I would really want the safety manager to have the strength of caution rather than optimism in that particular context. And so in a team, you typically want a mix of both. If you think of, I managed to get these cards from Agile Stationery, these, you probably can't see it because of the background, but these estimation poker cards. And what's really the idea behind estimation poker is that some people will come up with more optimistic estimates because that's their typical perhaps tendency to be more optimistic, and some would be more cautious. And so we benefit from having that diversity in strengths in a team. And we can take that example to, you know, other examples of strengths besides optimism and caution, but I'm just using that particular one because I think a lot of people in this group are into agile and such techniques. So you probably, hopefully thought about the exercise that I gave you earlier on to think about what's one strength you like to see in the people you work with. And my guess would be that—
Ryan, if you want, we could try and get answers from people now. So we seem to have been able to make a change.
Sure, if they come up, that's great. If people can type. Oh yeah, yeah, I see some in the chat already. Excellent. So yeah, if you want to type into the chat, what's one strength you like to see in the people you work with? So Naila says empathy. Jenny says warmth. Simon, flexibility, humor, honesty, teamwork, resilience, open-mindedness. Excellent. So these are all strengths. Collaborative, accountability, drive. Excellent. Okay. So I would hazard a guess that for most of you, the strength that you've written in the chat is actually a strength that you have yourself. And if it's not, it's probably a strength that you at least aspire to have. And you've probably aspired to have that for quite some time. I've seen someone saying that they agree with that. So in my case, people often say that I'm reliable. You know, if they ask me to do something, and I agree to do it, I'll almost always deliver on that, unless something really massive comes in and prevents me from doing that. So who am I more likely to hire if I was to hire somebody? I'd probably be more likely to hire somebody who is reliable, because I value the strength of reliability. It's something that I have. It's something that's important to me. But what if I was to hire 5 people and I was to hire them all based on their reliability? What might happen in that context? We might overplay that strength of reliability, and we might actually lose out on some spontaneity, some responsiveness, some going with gut instinct, for example, because if everyone is very reliable, they're going to follow through in what they've promised to do, and they might forget that, or they might just not notice things that are changing around them that need some more responsiveness. So what we really should be doing is actually seeking out our opposites. But what we tend to do is we tend to prefer to work with people who are like us. And so we develop a sort of a bias towards certain ways of thinking, certain practices, certain norms. And what we would really benefit from is to appreciate the variety of different strengths and the diversity. What we might say is that nobody is as capable as everybody. Yeah, so if we took if there was such a thing as a superhuman, which I think the world would be quite boring if we were all superhuman, but if there was such a thing, we could argue that that superhuman would have all the best strengths of all the humans on the planet. Yeah, so how best could we approximate that is to have the diversity of teams and organizations that have those strengths within. Yeah, and then obviously some leanings depending on the context of your team and your organization towards certain strengths. So that's a bit about strengths. If we just change tack a bit and go on to our second big idea, which was how we perform is driven by the stories we tell ourselves. And this is based a lot around the work of Carol Dweck, who wrote a book called Mindset, Timothy Wilson around how we can redirect our thoughts, and Martin Seligman in the field of positive psychology. So what we touched on earlier was that we have these stories that we tell ourselves. We actually have multiple parts inside us that are often even competing against each other with different messages that we're being given. And so examples like you see of, I'm not the sort of person that does this. I must be positive. I mustn't be negative. It's not right to do this. It's not right to do that. So they often have words like must, should, shouldn't, judgment sort of words, and they're often directed towards ourselves, and they can be directed towards others as well. And things like, do we believe that something's easy, or do we believe that we can't and it's too difficult, determines a lot of the result that we can actually achieve, just the thought of whether we can do something or whether we can't do something. So how can we actually work with this, and particularly in relation to using the StrongSuits cards? So we could actually benefit from the work of Daniel Hoffman, who came up with the core quadrant theory. And we could start with any of these boxes. So let's say we're telling a story, or we're coaching somebody, and they're coming up with some kind of story. They have a performance appraisal that's coming up. They really want to ask for a salary increase, but it's clear from what they're saying that they just don't feel like they could possibly ask for a salary increase in this performance appraisal. So we could pick up from that there's some kind of limitation in the wording that they're using, that they're feeling kind of timid in this situation, and they might benefit from actually having the strength of confidence. Now, their natural strength might actually be more to be modest. So it's useful for them first to see that actually what they might be saying is that, oh, I'm too timid. I can't ask for this kind of thing. I'm never able to ask for a raise. And actually, we might be able to see that, well, help them to see that actually, first, let's see it from a strength perspective, that you're modest. You want to truly evaluate your own strengths in this context, rather than go into the arrogant side of things and overblow them. But in this context, you might benefit more from the strength of confidence. So just by seeing that this person has an allergy to appearing arrogant, so they might have a message like, being arrogant is not a good look, or I mustn't appear arrogant. So that's their allergy. But really what that's preventing them from doing is from bringing their strength of confidence. And they're defaulting to timidity. So just seeing that can really help to break that sort of cycle, and to see that, yeah, my natural strength is modesty, but I also have some behavioral flexibility. I might be able to, in this context, also bring forth a natural strength of confidence. And of course, they're not necessarily opposites, but when you actually draw them up on the core quadrants, you actually see that the strength of modesty and the strength of confidence could be seen as opposite strengths. And of course, when you're using the cards, they often appear as the opposite strengths on the cards. And so we could talk about dialing up strengths and dialing down strengths. In certain contexts, it's more appropriate to be bringing forth the strength of confidence. And in other contexts, it might be more appropriate to bring forth the strength of modesty. So another way we can work with this, if you remember the Seinfeld series, for those of you who were around in the 90s. So the George Costanza method. George Costanza was a character in Seinfeld and in the sitcom Seinfeld. And really what this episode was about, it was called The Opposite, where George's life was going really badly for him. And so he decided to do exactly the opposite of everything that he was doing. So, for example, the picture on the left, he would normally try and sort of use persuasive language if he approached a woman who he liked randomly in a diner. And in this context, he decided to be really straight talking, just be totally honest. And so he walked up and he said, "Hi, I'm George. I'm unemployed and I live with my mother." And the woman goes, "Oh, wow, that's really interesting. Hi," and it starts a whole conversation. So things started to go really a lot better for him. And then in the next one, he had someone kicking his chair in a movie theater. He turns around, this person's really big rugby player, and he says, "You just try me, just try one more time." So instead of being his natural timid self, he decided to do the opposite, become really confident, even to the extent of arrogant. And then the last one, he's in a job interview and he decides to really play it down. He goes without a suit and tie. He just seems really relaxed and he gets the job. So this is one way that we could work with it. Instead of sort of just totally being our normal selves and defaulting to our usual behavior, you go the opposite. And instead of going so far the opposite, normally what will happen is you'll just go somewhere in the middle. Yeah, because you're so used to being in one extreme, if you try and go in the other extreme, you actually end up somewhere in the middle. So that's the joy. I just want to stop and see if there's any questions, because I do see there's a few comments coming through. If there's anything that anyone
There's quite a lot of logistical stuff, but I think Jenny Martin asked an excellent question about where the research came from.
Which research in particular? Are you able to respond?
Myself, no. More a question for yourself. Love these cards. Some questions. Do the suits of the cards represent different domains of strength, relationship builder, execution, etc., in the way that the Gallup Strength Finder does? Also, how have the 34 strengths been, the 52 strengths been decided from which research? Is it based on the Gallup 32 or a mixture of different sources?
Oh, wow. And is that all part of Jenny's question, is it?
That's the text of the question.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, there's a vast number of sources that have been sort of cross-referenced in that, but Gallup is one of them. I mentioned the interaction styles of Linda Behrens, the DISC system, William Moulton Marsden. There's NASA has used a whole number of strengths in their studies around high-performing teams. There's about 30 to 50 models that are actually cross-referenced in the StrongSuits strengths, but certainly we can have a further conversation about that if you want to kind of delve deeper into it. We have a whole inventory that we kind of cover in the courses themselves, and we will be publishing a white paper that will go further into the origins of a lot of these strengths too. So it's a great question. Thanks. And we can also, I know there were several dimensions to that question, so we can pick them apart at the end as well, if you like. Great. So moving on to communication styles. So if you ask any team, what are the top problems in this team, communication will always come up as, the top 3 at least, or something around communication. And what we can do is we could see that communication is a lot down to seeing things from different perspectives. and most conflicts are actually because we're opposites in some way. So if we look at how the different, and maybe this partly answers some of Jenny's question too, is how the different suits relate to communication styles, is generally we could say that most people are somewhere along the continuum between being more people focused and being more task focused. So yeah, am I more focused on people, or am I more focused on the tasks? And somewhere along that continuum. And then on the other continuum, you could say that generally people are somewhere along the continuum between being more expressive or being more reflective. In traditional sense, this is similar to extrovert, introvert. And so we could then, from the combination of that, then determine what combinations of suits people are more aligned towards, which then relates to their communication styles. And so this is, we have much more elaborate descriptions of them, but as a kind of simplified description, and this appears in one of the explanatory cards in the card deck, is people who are stronger in spades tend to be more determined, more driven, more assertive. If you think of a spade like a shovel, you know, you get dug in and you get things done. You use a lot of kind of sometimes force, and it can go into the realm of being pushy if we were to overplay it, for example. And then hearts, if you think of a heart, energetic, enthusiastic, persuasive. Think of a big heart. The kind of people you walk into a networking room and they're sort of in the center of the room, connecting to a lot of people. The clubs, if you think of a club like a social club, it's really focused around the people. So they're very strong in the people dimension, tend to be patient, agreeable, diplomatic, good listeners, people who are kind of more softly spoken and more people oriented. And then diamonds, if you think of a diamond, it's clear cut, it's precise, it's clear, reliable, objective, thorough, and will tend to have a proclivity towards one or two of these dimensions or some combination of them. So how can we play with this? So we could look at the one of the most popular games that we play called Your Winning Hand. So you can imagine being in a group of people or a team, and there are a few cards in the middle of the table, and then you have a few of your own cards, and you're swapping cards out. So the cards that are less you're getting rid of to the pile in the middle of the table, and you're taking a card that is more like you, and you're thinking of you at your best. So what are you like when you're at your best? That's your natural best, your natural strength. So in the case of me, so so my wife and I, we alternate cooking. So one night of the week she'll cook, another night of the week I cook. Not exactly one, but you know, more or less half and half. And when she cooks, I'll sit down and I'll kind of start to taste the food, and I'll kind of say, oh, you know, this is a nice amount of I like the spiciness of this. It's got a nice amount of heat. It's a little bit too salty, I would say. And so I'm kind of, you know, really going through this in my mind, what's objective, you know, to kind of say the good, the bad, to evaluate this dish that's in front of me in as an objective way as I can. And that's how I naturally am. And that's what I bring to the table. And I think that it's good for us as a family. So we all benefit from trying to improve the food that we have on the table, and my feedback helps us to improve in an objective way as possible. And my wife might say to me, oh, can't you be a bit more appreciative? Yeah, so of course we're both right, because in a team, which, you know, a family is some kind of a team, we need to have the strengths of improvement, looking at things objectively, trying to make things better for all of us. But on the way there, we need to appreciate what's good and enjoy what's good. And also, if we take the field of appreciative inquiry, what we appreciate tends to get stronger and better. So if I was to focus on what was good, it's more likely that next time that will get even better, and the dish will improve over time. So if I was to be moving the cards around, I would take the strength of objectivity, and I would discard the strength of appreciation. And if my wife was there, she would probably agree with me. If I did it the other way around, she would hopefully say, I'm not so sure you're as appreciative as you think you are. Yeah. And obviously that's a strength that, because I've been aware of this for some time, I've worked on. And so if I'm working in a team, in an organization, I'll send people kudo cards for Management 3.0 to say thank you and give gratitude for certain things. So it doesn't come naturally to me, but I've learned that I can dial up that strength because I know how useful it is now in several contexts. So how can we then work with this in a team context? Because really one of the biggest strengths of StrongSuits is in the team. And so we could plot on a map where we are based on the cards that we've chosen. And there's obviously more accurate diagnostics that we can do on our own, playing particular games that make it more accurate than if we were playing it in a team context. But we benefit from both, because in a team context, we're getting the feedback from people in our blind spots that we might not be aware of ourselves. So we could then plot our results on a map. And then we can also turn the cards around and play a similar diagnostic or a similar game from how we behave when we're under stress. So when we're under stress, we might move to a different type, a different communication style than when we're at our best. And then we can plot that movement from when we're at our best to, you could say, when we're at our worst or when we're under stress. And then that comes up with all kinds of interesting discussions about why teams behave the way they do, why conflicts might occur in certain circumstances, because where we move to when we're under stress. That's something that then becomes a talking point, perhaps one-to-one coaching, but often the awareness itself is enough to spark change in a team, in a system. So other contexts where we could use this is, of course, in one-to-ones, in career coaching, in performance appraisals, if you're having them. And the traditional way of giving feedback would be to say, well, you're good at this, but you need to improve at that. But what we can do with the cards is we could say, well, when you're at your best, you're like this strength over here. And it would be even better if you also showed this strength. And of course, if it's a game and you're using cards, it's a lot easier to give that kind of feedback than to kind of go up to someone or chat them and say, I think we really need to have a conversation. I need to give you some feedback. It's much easier if you've just got the cards to refer to. Kind of the barrier to giving that feedback is eased. And of course, if you're focused at the level of strengths, then you're really giving feedback based on strengths which are evident or in some cases underplayed. And so, of course, in the context of a game, it's a much more safe context in which to give that feedback, whether it's from superior to subordinate or whether it's from teammate to teammate. Really what you're doing is you're increasing the awareness in the teams and in the individual. And we all have our blind spots. One of the ways to help illuminate those is to get the input from others. And so a game that is focused around team strengths and teams being able to reflect to each other where they see those strengths in each other, and where that they see that there's perhaps a strength that could be brought to the fore that would benefit the team, then you're able to benefit from the wisdom of the team, so to speak. And so different contexts. So the picture on the left is the most blurry one, because that was actually a Christmas party where people think, well, let's just have a bit of fun and get out, a game of cards. It's Christmas time. And so they brought us in to actually run a workshop in their organization. It was the end of the year. They had a bit of budget left, and they actually ended up having really deep conversations that they didn't expect to have around, just a light Christmas party. And that's one of the benefits of playing a game again, is that it enables you to have fun and at the same time have the conversations that really matter. And so we can use them at staff conferences, and really in contexts where we really want to have those conversations, those deep conversations that really matter. Helps to build psychological safety. A lot of the studies around psychological safety and also the work of the Google Oxygen project has really shown that the #1 factor in teams that determines their performance way above any technical skills or anything else is trust and psychological safety. And so really what we want to do is we want to try and build psychological safety in the team. If there's no psychological safety, a game can start to kind of safely bring that up in incremental stages, not starting with the most sort of, at your worst game, but starting with the at your best, starting with the appreciative inquiry approach, and then building it up and eventually moving towards, well, how could we, what's the even better if, and sort of building up in stages, that psychological safety up in stages. So I think we're closing in on time, so I'll just mention how you can get more engaged and more involved. Obviously, you can buy yourself a pack of cards and go and experiment with it. There's some starter guides online that can help you to get started, or you can play the Suit Sampler game online, which is kind of the most basic entry level if you just want to get a sense of your top 5 strengths. And when you've got the physical cards, and we will be evolving the online games as well over time, but when you've got the physical cards, there's obviously a lot more that you can do at this stage. And as I said, if you're in the London area, then you can actually, in 2 weeks' time, which is very soon, you can actually have an opportunity to come in and try it out physically in person. The lowest barrier to entry is just coming to a face-to-face meetup in 2 weeks' time on Friday, if you can make that. And if you wanted to take it further, then you could do a 1-day practitioner course, which gets you to experience the games and facilitate to a certain extent. But if you really want to take it then a step further and sort of advanced techniques of facilitation with peer feedback and so on, you can then join our 2nd day, which is facilitated training. And you can find that on the StrongSuits website or Systemic Agility website, which is a partner company, and use the promo code agile-stationery for some surprise promo on that. So I will turn it back to questions or anything from you, Devika or Simon.
So Margot has asked, do sessions need light or strong facilitating or none?
Do sessions need light or strong facilitation or none?
Yeah, I'm not sure what session type that was related to.
Yeah, so obviously we can almost always benefit from good facilitation, particularly starting out. But great if a team can self-facilitate. And certainly there's no specific need to have a facilitator for almost any of the games, unless you want to benefit from an external coach facilitator. Obviously, you can use the games for one-to-one coaching, in which case you would ask or invite the coachee to play some of the games on their own, which they take sort of 15-20 minutes aside, and then that turns into a coaching conversation that you would have with them. So yeah, always benefit from a facilitator, but doesn't necessitate it.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Ryan, if that's okay. As with any game, there are challenges around simply starting it, and then the second stage is to kind of adopt it as part of your regular process. So a sort of general question is, what challenges have you seen in the adoption of playing StrongSuits? and what tips would you have for people to overcome them if they want to introduce it in their teams?
I obviously don't see a lot of the people who have never attended a workshop or a meetup or anything like that, because they're just going ahead and just doing their own thing with that. With people who have attended a workshop, a training, a practitioner training, and then even gone on to the facilitator training, then they would typically have the tools to continue going, as much as they want on their own, and they would typically then come back for just pieces of advice around particular contexts that they're in or challenges they're facing. But I think any good, it's really a tool for coaching and facilitation. So if you have the basic skills of coaching, then the limitation is more that's really in the end the only limitation, because there's so much flexibility around the games and the combinations and permutations that people make up a lot of their own, and that's what we want to do, is actually start to inventorize more and more of the different ways that people are using it. So I would say the barrier, if anything, is really down to the team or the coach facilitator about what's limiting them, rather than, I mean, if anyone had any particular examples of how and where they would like to use it, I'm very happy also to answer, to that.
Okay, one more from the electronic Q&A. What are the details of the meetup on the 24th Feb? The name of the meetup group would be a good one. Yeah,
if you go to systemicagility.com, so the name there that you see on the screen.com, there's a schedule page, and you'll be able to see all of this on the schedule, including the sign up for the meetup.
Just share that link, Ryan, on the chat, just in case anyone missed it.
Brilliant, thanks.
Lovely how David and I complement each other, because I put it in the Q&A, she put it in the chat. Everywhere now.
Brilliant. Complementary strengths.
Not always, Ryan. Anyway, any more questions from anybody? I think we've literally got just a couple of minutes to go.
From me, apologies for the technical trouble, and I hope you had a great session, Ryan. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I enjoyed talking about this stuff, and I'm reading some of the comments that people have put in. So yeah, thanks Jenny for sharing how you view strengths.
Yes, Jenny had some feedback on a workshop that they ran last week. I wonder if that sort of sounds familiar in terms of the setup in which you would use the cards or apply your technique. But yeah, it's
we
looks
obviously
like
agree paper cards make everything more fun. We wouldn't be here if we didn't think that.
Yeah, yeah, just reading the feedback from Jenny about using StrengthsFinder games and covering, it seems, some of the areas that we talked about, the blind spots, and then negative traits mapped against their strengths, and then saying that these cards would have made it more fun. I think that's what cards really offer, is the fun aspect and being able to still have those important conversations at the same time.
fantastic. All right, so I think we have we've met the time that we allocated. Ryan, thank you so much for this session. I think I'm going to go away and have a go at these cards myself. We're going to share more details of your workshops, because I think there were a few people interested in when these workshops are being held and where. So we'll share these details. Ryan, would you be happy to share the slides that you shared today?
Someone was asking you.
Yeah, I might not share all of them, but I can certainly share a set of them. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think
come from the training materials that we share with our facilitators, but yeah, I'll certainly share a subset.
That's great. So I think one of the attendees wanted to ask about that. And we will be sharing a recording of this webinar as well, as Simon, you mentioned, on our YouTube channel and LinkedIn and Twitter media as well. So we will share the material and the video on our channels, including Meetup. But yeah, for now, I think this has been a great session. So thank you, Ryan. Thanks once again.
Great. Thanks, Simon and Vika, and thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everyone, for attending.